Because it regulates muscle contraction of the body, it maintains learning, memory, and the emotions in the brain. That's what I'm looking at. I'm trying to build up those emotions. I'm trying to build all of those different things in an individual so that, one, I don't want them to develop different adverse effects. But again, excess amounts of dopamine can lead to what? Schizophrenia. And then, in many cases, schizophrenia can be alleviated by giving the individual medication that blocks dopamine receptors. So if we go back, receptor sites, we'll look at that different area. So that's one of the big things. Dopamine comes in, starts to block them. That's primarily what we're looking at. We're trying to make sure the individual is able to have those dopamine blockers there. But one of the big things is, if you are on some type of medication for treating schizophrenia, because again, you look at the outlook of, I'm a big proponent of therapy. I'm not saying that medication does not work, but again, medication is good only to a certain given time.
It's a cycle,
Yeah.
because when I was at Duty, I was on 11 different ones
Mm-hmm.
at one time. Like,
Yeah.
My commanders are like, how you freaking work?
Yeah.
SSRI, and I have to take this to combat this, and it's just
Yes.
pretty soon you're just out of the way, you don't even know what you're doing.
Yeah.
So, schizophrenia can be alleviated by giving the individual medication.
Yeah.
So is that medication is long-term permanent,
Primarily, yes.
and then, but then it has its side effects, right?
It does. And that's one of the things that's where you're always looking at.
Mhm.
And the individual that I know, one of the things, they do have schizophrenia. But within that, they're able to convince mom and dad, I'm fine today. I'm good today. I don't need it. What does mom and dad do? Okay, he is good today. He's functioning better. Okay, well, we won't give it to you today. The body is relying on that. It's helping the individual. When the individual ends up not taking the medication, the individual will leave. Becomes a missing person case. That's the reason why you have a lot of individuals on the streets, is we have a lot of individuals out there, because one, you have individuals who are not being treated. Then when you also look at the disease model, we're looking at it as, they're dirty, they're gross, get away from me. That's always the outlook.
And then the chemical imbalance is caused by, what is that usually caused by?
Again, some can be genetic, can be predisposed to that. And a lot of times, that's one of the big things is, again, your body will try to regulate itself, tries to reach a homeostasis. But again, you have individuals who still have, say for example, heart disease. Say for example, all these different disorders. One of the big things is, individual may end up overproducing. Your pituitary gland ends up secreting all the different things within your hormones. And so when that happens, your body tends to go
Also
haywire.
taking in like substances and alcohol.
Exactly.
Causes imbalances.
Mhm. Exactly.
And, I'm sorry, constant use of drug use or alcohol can imbalance those chemicals and then lead to a chronic mental illness like bipolar or schizophrenia.
So one of the things that we come across, say for example, different disorders, a lot of times it is there already. There's already genetic predisposition. But you also recognize, okay, if that's the case, I have a genetic predisposition. Say for example, if you have a history of alcohol abuse in your family, and you think about it, you're thinking, you know what, do I have an actual alcohol gene and everything else? But if you already noticed that, why would you full-heartedly go forward and take it anyway? So that's one of the big things we have individuals who are like, oh yeah, I know it's a history of alcohol, we have a history of alcohol abuse, but I'm still gonna drink anyway. It's like, why? Because again, it also comes down to the aspect of choice. Because when you look at it, A lot of the information, say for example, even therapy, it comes to choice-based behavior. So when I look at individuals, I'm always looking at the aspect of, is this a choice that you've made? And a lot of them are like, yeah, I did. But now I'm trying to get off it. And again, that's one of the big things. It's a little bit harder, but it is possible. So, does that answer your question? Okay.
I have a friend that came back in '06.
Mm-hmm.
He couldn't deal with a lot of the stuff coming back, so we started smoking meth.
Mm-hmm.
And he became schizophrenic.
That's where I was going with it. So as I lost my whole train of thought. So one of the things is the environmental factors, because you have the nature and the nurture. Nature versus nurture. That's always the debate. But the reality is, a lot of times it's an interplay. Interplay of nature, you already have it there, due to a trauma, due to different stressors, due to different illnesses, due to different areas. And then you have the nurturing aspect, the environment. So the environment, if you're around different stressors as well, it raises your dopamine levels, raises all these different areas where, one, you're looking at saying, okay, this is happening to me. How can I alleviate it? So I'm going to reach out to this. Hopefully it helps me. Then it has other spikes in different parts of your anatomy again. And then that's where the whole aspect of it ends up impacting you.
But him taking smoking meth just fried him, I guess.
The other thing that we came across, and this was finally being researched with Vietnam and everything else, but if you go back farther, PTSD. Prior to that, they didn't really study it. They just looked at it as, oh yeah, you know what, it's just, you know, he just went into shock. But the reality is, individuals, again, we were talking about children. So one of the things is, if you have had a traumatic incident or a traumatic event in your life, it sticks with you at a young age. But maybe you did not deal with it, or maybe at that given point, you suppressed it. And then as later on in life, suddenly there's another stressor that hits you, what's going to happen? Whatever was laying dormant is now going to spike. That's the unique part. That's the unique part about our bodies as well. So even though it's malleable and pliable, it's one of those things where if we have not dealt with it, that's the reason why I'm always trying to stress a lot of psych students, you need to start dealing with all these different things. That's the reason why if you're going to the counseling or clinical field, they tell you to have a therapist. Students are encouraged to have a therapist. And people are like, why? I'm fine. Well, just to be on the safe side. Because one, as you're going along, you're going to come across different outlooks. You're going to come across, and there's individuals that I've known in the field that are counselors, but suddenly they go back to school to get additional accreditation in different areas. All of a sudden it triggered a stressor in their lives, and then suddenly they're going to therapy for the rest of their lives. That's one of the big things you're always looking at, saying, okay. Because again, what are we looking at? We're looking at the mind. The mind is very malleable and pliable, but within that, it tends to move around. It's kind of one of those things where it's very finicky. It tends to, because how many have ever had an emotion at one point, all of a sudden you taper it off, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm okay. Again, that's one of the things. You're like, ah, and then all of a sudden you're like, ah, and all of a sudden you're in, people are like, So, norepinephrine aids in learning and memory, but excess amounts can lead to mania, while decreased amounts leads to some form of depression. And then you have serotonin, regulates moods, communicates satiation, and regulates sleep. Reduced serotonin leads to depression and eating disorders. So one of the big things is, where do you usually get, when does serotonin usually kick in?
Towards the evening.
Towards the evening, when you go where? Sleep. How many have ever worked night shift? It's fun, isn't it? It's hard. Why? Because your body's circadian rhythm is off. So when you wake up in the morning and that sunlight hits you, it hits your refractories, it hits your skin, it hits everything, and you're like, oh man, I feel good. It's tiring, but I feel okay. It regulates me. Versus if you, and I've tried this before, which I recommend never to try it. So years and years ago, when I was in my undergrad, I learned about this, and I'm like, oh, that's amazing, serotonin. All right, I want to see how long I can go without sleep. 4 days. That's how long I could go. My body started functioning off. It was one of those things where, this is when I was living in Albuquerque, so it was one of those things where it's like, all right, no sleep whatsoever. I wanted to see how long I could last. 4 days, that's how long I could last. At that point, I'm like, this is it, I'm done. I'm tapping out.
What were you doing in those 4 days?
So 4 days, I was using different energy drinks. That's the reason why I don't drink energy drinks anymore, because it just literally cured me of that. But as I was going along, I was drinking coffee, everything else, to try to allow my body to regulate. And I tried, watching TV, watching movies, staying up, because I wanted to see. So I just kept doing it. And at 4 days, I was like, this is it. And there was a reason why. I was going to get on the bus, I stepped forward, boom, and I'm like, everything was almost in slow motion. But everything was still functioning at a higher rate. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, I need to go home. Slept for 2 days. So that was literally a 6-day experiment. Horrible. But your body needs that. It needs sleep. That's the reason why, if you're in a depressive mood, or if you're in that area of sleep deprivation, that's the reason why, if you notice the military, they'll utilize that. They finally did away, they try to do away with it. But if you're in the area of clandestine services, they'll utilize different aspects and different methods.
Oh, they still do, once you get to SOCOM. I knew it was coming, right? To go, because I've been to RAS, to Ranger School and everything. They actually made it, they put a bag over my head, threw me in a van. I freaking dropped down in the middle of freaking Fort Benning, middle of nowhere. 2 gallons of water, seen a week.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
That's it,
Mhm.
you know? And you have to pretty much live off the land. I've eaten bugs, plants. And it was me and 2 other guys at different points. We finally met up.
Yeah.
And then, you know, body heat and all that.
And it's one of those things where it tests.
Screwed up with a lot of this. But
Yeah.
Again, they're trying to teach you mind over matter.
They really are.
Uh,
But it's at the detriment of who? You. Because when they send you back, do they reacclimate you? No. They try.
What do you mean?
They try to reacclimate you to the environment again. They don't necessarily do a good job. That's the reason why you have a lot of veterans.
I don't know what we got back. We had a big freaking buffet when we first, but our stomach shrunk.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, they had like ham, turkey.
Yeah.
It was like a Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
But it was like in freaking August.
Mhm.
But I mean, all of us just had a sandwich and we were full.
Yeah. Because your body has adjusted to something else. But now you're almost in essence torturing yourself. But that's primarily what you're looking at, saying, okay, for individuals, this is their everyday reality. Boom, 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 boom. So when that's happening, we're always looking at saying, okay, we need to help you to regulate your sleep. We need to help you to allow you, say for example, hypnosis, if you want to go the route of hypnosis. Hypnotherapy, you have medicinal.
Is there a way to release your body from, is it meditation?
You have mindfulness.
Exercise,
Yeah.
exercising?
You have mindfulness, you have yoga, you have different, that's where we look at the Eastern practices.
What does melatonin do?
So melatonin, one, it allows your body to relax, go to sleep. That's the reason why you take it at night. Why? So you can.
No, I mean, like, what does it do? As far
It's
as
basically serotonin, right?
Yeah. Because one, you want to try to make sure that your body is regulated overall. Because as time progresses, this is what's happening. Your moods are starting to disrupt. your communication, or your satiation in terms of your bodily intake, in terms of eating, everything else. It's trying to make sure it communicates all the way through. So that one, you want to make sure that you get out of this funk. Yes?
Well, like, we were talking about the whole yoga thing, and before the semester, I had one semester where I took yoga in the evenings, and we would do it for an hour and a half. And so I remember the semester before, it wasn't like my grades weren't too good because I was kind of not sleeping a lot. And so then when I took the yoga, every evening I would go because it was 5 days out of the week. So I would go, and that whole semester I slept so much better.
Yeah.
So.
And the reason why is you're centering you. Because as you're going along, you're looking at all these different interactions. No. So, if you notice that primarily your brain, you have the hindbrain, look it down there. You're looking at your heart rate, your respiration. That's the reason why we want to make sure that we prevent anything happening from here. We want to make sure that there's no impact to there. You want to make sure there's no impact to traumatic brain injuries, because if that happens, it'll disrupt your heart rate, all these different things. That's the reason why when we look at TBI, we're looking at all these different aspects of when your brain hits front versus impact versus shock versus all these different things. So that one, as you're going forward, again, your brain is uber important. But a lot of individuals, guess what? How many are into rodeos? So you have individuals who go out there, shut themselves to a bull. Some people are like, what? No, it's safe. Okay. And you have individuals, Friday Night Lights, there's always those impacts. Individuals who are into boxing, all these different things. And we also look at the aspect of domestic violence. If you've been abused, even if you have had a concussion, one of the big things is, what is a concussion? It's when you black out. Right? Yes. So when you black out, guess what? That's a traumatic brain injury. Some individuals are like, well, it was only just for a small bump. Yeah, that's a traumatic brain injury. That's impactful. So the midbrain, pathway between the hindbrain and the forebrain. Your reticular activating system plays a role in sleep, attention, and arousal. Injury to this area will lead to an individual to a state of unconscious in terms of comatose. Comatose meaning that you are now in a coma. Very scary. And then you have forebrain is made of the cerebrum, the thalamus, the hypothalamus, the limbic system, and the basal ganglia. The thalamus is involved in sleep and attention. So I guess primarily within that, you are all utilizing what? Your thalamus right now. No. Hopefully you're not sleeping at the same time. Hopefully you're paying attention. Relays sensory information to other parts of the brain. Within that, the thalamus, hypothalamus, and the hippocampus make up the limbic system. So this is the whole portion. So I want you to look at your hand. I want you to go like this. That's sitting in your head right now. That's primarily the size of your brain. It's so tiny. That sits in your head right now.
I have a question.
Yes.
For like when you're saying like traumatic or brain injuries, does that relate to like, let's say like when women give birth and then they use the forceps to take the baby out? Would that be considered or related to a brain injury for the child?
So one of the things is, and I think we were looking at forceps last night. A lot of times, again, the forceps are primarily used only at a given time when it is an emergency, due to the fact that oxygen is not being applied to the baby. But initially, even within that, there's a certain procedure that you utilize the forceps to pull the baby out. A lot of times people just simply think it just goes in and just clamps out. One, if you notice the way the shape of the forceps, it is utilized in a very unique manner to allow the baby to initially still be pulled out without damaging spinal cord, everything else. So, and that's to make sure that that hopefully the doctor knows what he's doing. If they don't, then I would be very concerned. So the hypothalamus is the most important gland in the body. Look at there, it's literally right there. Located between the thalamus and the pituitary. So the pituitary, right there, if you notice, is it right there? That's your hormones. Hormone gland. So it controls the regulation of body temperature, concentration of fluids, storage of nutrients, motivations, hunger, thirst, sex, parenting and aggression, and emotions. Notice that though. That little tiny thing is the thing that allows us to have body temperature regulation. So we don't overheat. If we overheat, what happens? We have hot flashes. All this is happening. So if you're over the age of 50, you have females who go through hot flashes, menopause. Same thing applies to men, andropause. So within that, you have individuals who have a decline in testosterone, all these different things. So again, one of the big things we're always looking at is for men, they're looking like, oh yeah, they don't go through the same thing. But we see that they also go through similar aspects within that. A lot of individuals are like, really? Yeah, that's the reason why they go out and buy a car and everything else. What time do you think? 10:50? Oh, wow. Right. So, moving forward, cerebral. So you have the corpus callosum. One of the big things is when you do brain cutting, one of the things we always look at is the aspect of the brain itself. And all these different things in the brain, every little crevices here and there, these are important. The reason why is if it's smoothed out, you begin to have memory loss. All of that is important. Everything, the way your brain is collected, it's also important.
And that's when Alzheimer's is.
That's when Alzheimer's gets, yeah. When I was working with an individual, they had a traumatic brain injury, and that's how they died. And so I was looking at the brain itself, and it had a hemorrhaging of the brain. But you also look at, they had a high amount of alcohol use. So the brain started to really smooth out. And it was very interesting when you look at it, you're like, wow. And it's one of those very impactful aspects. So you have genetic variation, we have adoption studies, estimates of genetic influences, phenylketonuria, there you go. Biological treatments, convulsive therapy, psychosurgery, pharmacology. This is the early portions, but initially within that, electroconvulsive therapy has been applied now. But again, like I said, there's still so much that we're still trying to learn as we go along. So this is magnetic seizure therapy, and then you have electroconvulsive therapy. The vagus nerve stimulation, the vagus nerve stimulation, frontal lobotomy, transmission. So again, you have this. You'll have this all. We didn't even cover a lot again. I swear we keep missing all of this. This is one of the things I would advise you to look at. Tardive dyskinesia. I'm pretty sure you've seen commercials on that. That's where one, if you're taking additional medication and everything else, it does have long-term side effects utilized in treatment of schizophrenia. And then, let's see, you have relapse. You have Sigmund Freud, psychodynamic theory. Freud looked at sexual repression from the aspect of evolutionary perspectives. What can go wrong between the id, ego, and superego. The id, we're looking at pleasure principles, libido. The ego, which is more of the reality aspect, primarily living within your given mode of construct. And then you have the superego. So these are all the different things. You have repression, denial, projection. You have rationalization, reaction formation, displacement, contextualization, attachment, regression, sublimation. Again, these are all things that you primarily will notice. You have projection. Say, for example, if you're angry, if you're all of that, you try to project it onto another person and say, you're angry. And you try to push it off. You have the area of regression. You have sublimation. When you look at it, you have the phallic stage. In other words, penis envy, or not penis envy, but electric conflict. And then you have the Oedipus. Where's the Oedipus? It's on here somewhere. So this is where talking therapy really came into play. But again, before you get to talking therapy, what are we always looking at? We're looking at the outlook of, did it really shut off that one? Why did it shut off that one? So when we're looking at talking therapy, you're looking at it from a bottom, or from a top-down approach. But a lot of clinicians always try to use the top-down, saying, oh, we need to talk about it, we need to talk about it, we need to regulate it. But the reality is, you can't regulate something if the individual has not processed it from a bodily outlook. So if they're able to control their body, that's the reason why we utilize yoga, we utilize deep breathing, to allow a person to have control of that first, so then talk therapy becomes more beneficial. And I shall see you guys next week, same time. Same hour. Does anybody have any questions so far? I want to wait before I turn it off. So I'm going to shut off the camera now.